What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Politically Insane Late Night Show. It's going to be a good one. We've got a lot to get to. We're going to talk about Black History Month, what that is, and kind of debunking a post that's been going around all over social media. I'm sure you might have seen it. I'm sure you've heard lots about Black History Month. We're going to discuss it. We need to. It's Black History Month, as well as Republicans and how they are attacking our democracy, according to AOC. Of course, we can trust everything AOC has to say. And a dad in Canada confronts a thug who comes and tries to take away a flag from his daughter. We'll see what happens in that scenario. And of course, wrapping it up with This Week in History. Today, of course, I've got my brother Britton with me.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So today is an action-packed late night show. So for those who may have noticed, we didn't have a regular podcast episode this week. We were supposed to have a guest. We're hopefully going to be able to get that guest on soon in the future. We had plans around that guest, and it just didn't work out on their schedule. So some things came up. It's actually a Congress candidate, so a busy schedule there. We'll make sure to have something backup planned from now on. But before we get into this week's episode, and before we get into anything here with this action-packed episode, we want to make sure to let you guys know if you want to support Politically Insane to go over to politicallyinsane.us/shop. We've got a never-ending list of things. Well, it ends. I think there's only like 2 pages on it, but there's a huge inventory right now. Go and check it out. We've got some new shirts in the shop, so go check them out. Got some mugs and tumblers and all kinds of stuff. So go check it out. That's a great way to help support us here at Politically Insane. And also, we want to let you know that our sponsor for today's episode is Built Bar. Built Bar is really just an amazing way to sub for candy bars and sweets. Built Bars are amazing. I eat them pretty often, and I have to keep on keeping them in stock because they really have become a morning routine for me. Built Bars are just they taste amazing. They're made with real chocolate, and they're packed full of protein. They're good for you. So just go check it out. Go to built.com and use code INSANE for 10% off. I've actually got one here. I was going to eat before the show and just didn't get to it. Salted caramel. It's a very good one. I would encourage you to get their variety box. It's very good. Britton, you said you've had Built Bars before, right?
Yep. Yeah, I would definitely recommend them.
Yeah, I mean, Built Bars really are amazing. So go check them out. Again, that's built.com, and you can use code INSANE for 10% off. They really are just a great way to cut out sweets, if nothing else, because they just taste like a candy bar. But today, getting into Black History Month, of course, we know that it is February. It is Black History Month. I find it a little ironic that it's the shortest month of the year. I think there must have been a white man involved in deciding which month to give to Black History Month. But, for those of us who are white, we simply just don't know what Black History Month is really supposed to be all about. Britton, I have a feeling like you might know a little bit what Black History Month is. Can you give us a rundown?
I really don't. I feel like I kind of have a general idea, but I don't know. I know it comes around every year. I suppose it's to it's to remember people that have served our country great, such as LeBron James. Uh, I'm sure a lot of this, in all honesty, had to do with, if I were to guess, with Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm trying to remember some of the great people that have done some amazing things in the Black history, in the Black community. Um, Other than that, honestly, I don't really know a whole lot about it. I suppose, like I said, it's just to remember some of the great, Black lives that have mattered and done some good things in our country.
There, I think that was official too. I think you
Yeah,
can trust that evaluation
LeBron
100%.
James is in there somewhere. I'm sure LeBron James has something to do with it.
I think he was the founder.
Yeah,
I don't know, but again, I mean, it is very cool that they get the shortest month. Why didn't maybe it was the gays that, 'cause, Pride Month is what, like March or something like that? So they've got a regular month. Maybe they're the ones that were like, "No, we're gonna put February. We're gonna give them the shortest month. We want the longer month."
maybe
But
there's more gay white people. I don't know.
I mean, I suppose there is, but I always found that ironic. Like, of all the months, it's the shortest month. That's Black History Month. But it is to remember, it just ultimately all the great things that have happened for our Black Americans, and it's supposed to remember the history of really how Black Americans were able to overcome with all of the oppression. Which let's be honest, America was started when it was started. There was a lot of racism going on in America. There was all kinds of
Absolutely.
things that were going on in America. There was slavery, and that was huge, and that was a horrible thing. And we'll kind of get into where some of these racist ideas and racist laws and stuff like that really came from. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But really, it's just crazy, when when you look back and seeing how much we have really gone past racism, and where racism really isn't a thing. It was systemically in America a long time ago, but then you look at it today, and it really isn't. But it's becoming such an issue, and it's something that we really need to talk about. It's really something that needs to be discussed, because we need to talk about racism and what racism really is, and realize that with how it's been used, especially when you look at mainstream media, racism is not what mainstream media wants you to believe it is, or what really Black America in general wants you to believe it is. So we need to recognize what racism is, because when we start to use it out of context and use it, we start to nullify the true meaning of racism. And it really is a horrible thing and something we should be talking out against. And that's kind of what Black History Month is about. But I don't know. I'm just wondering, is Black History Month really something that needs to be a thing? I I just I don't really know why we have a month. Like, what is it for? Why can't we just recognize, the good things in American history every day? That, Black
We
history.
already have Martin Luther King Day. Come on, guys.
Yeah. I mean, really, Black history is American history. And all of this fuss about, like, how Black America hasn't had their history really told. I learned all kinds of things about how amazing Black people really did help Black Americans to, fight away from slavery, fight away from racism, have an equal opportunity in America. And you look around, I just want to know where Black America doesn't have the same equal opportunity as you or I. Where do they, because really we could probably look at it and see that they might even have an upper hand when we think of things like affirmative action and some of this diversity, equity, and inclusion that's going on. They might even have an upper hand in some ways in today's society. So, really, where is this systemic racism? Why do we need a Black History Month to talk about how racist our country is, or whatever the point is supposed to be? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But there's a post that I wanna get to, and it's a Facebook post that's been going around. I've seen it a few times on social media, and I'm sure some of you might have seen this same post, or maybe one similar to it. But it's this big, long post, and of course, you can see the picture here, and it looks like, a bunch of slaves on a boat or something, and, they're all being transported. You probably can't read it from the overlay pulled up, but for with this post, I'll read it to you, and we'll kind of talk about this post. So it says, "So you mean to tell me that someone down your ancestry line survived being chained to other human bodies for several months in the bottom of a disease-infested ship during the Middle Passage, lost their language, customs, and traditions, picked up the English language as best they could while working free of charge from sun up to sundown, as they watched babies sold from out of their out of their arms, and women raped by ruthless slave owners, took names with no last names, no birth certificates, no heritage of any kind, braved the Underground Railroad, survived the Civil War to enter into sharecropping, learned to read and write out of sheer will and determination, faced the burning crosses of the KKK, averted their eyes at the black bodies swinging from ropes hung on trees, fought in world wars as soldiers only to return to America as boys, marched in Birmingham, Horst Selma jails in Wilmington, assassinated in Memphis, and segregated in the South, ghettoed in the North, ignored in history books, stereotyped in Hollywood, and in spite of all, someone in your family line endured every era to make sure you would get here, but you would receive one rejection, face one obstacle, lose one friend, get overlooked, and you want to quit? How dare you entertain the very thought of quitting? People you will never know survived from generation to generation say, "You could succeed. Don't you dare let them down. It's not in our DNA to quit." So this is really talking to Black Americans and talking about how the history has been just full of really racism, and a lot of these points that it's all true, all of these things Black America did have to fight to get through that. But let me ask you something. Who was the ones to help fight for Black America? If you think of the North and think of what Abraham Lincoln, a white man, did,
Mhm.
the North was fighting against a lot of racists in the South who were the Democratic Party. So when you wanna look at all of this, it was also a white man who helped you survive. I'm not saying that, we should praise the white man at all. That's not at all what I'm saying, but I'm just saying this it wasn't only a war fought by Black America. You have to realize that there was anti-racist white people who also helped fight for a good cause, and I think that it is a great cause. It was a great thing to end slavery and to end all of this. And, all of these things, all of these historical things really did happen. There really was assassinations on people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. But when you look at some of those assassinations were also done by Black Americans, by Black people. So what's your point in bringing those up? And talking of when we get into if you've in the past in the history we learned about these things. It says there that they're ignored in history books. That they were segregated in the South, ghettoed in the North, and ignored in history books. So first, let's talk about the segregated in the South. When they were segregated in the South, of course, again that was in the past where we were able to get past that. We were able to fight for that, and it was people like Martin Luther King who fought for that. Rosa Parks. We can acknowledge some people like that. And when we think of ghettoed in the North, this is the idea that you were forced into a specific neighborhood because of the color of your skin, and that today you still can't get out of that. That's not true at all. But then ignored in history books, where? Britain, I know you went to the same schools as I did for the most part. Did you ever see where Black American were really the history of Black Americans was ignored?
I probably feel like I learned more about other cultures, and other races other than white people more than I ever did white people, just in general. I grew up learning about the history of Rosa Parks and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and I grew up learning about slavery. And I mean, I learned all this stuff in school. This was never overlooked. This was, at least in our school and at least in my time in school, it was definitely not overlooked. I learned all kinds of stuff about it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is like ignored in history books. How? Because I learned about a lot of stuff about the Underground Railroad, several classes over that in several different years. Probably from fourth or fifth grade up, learning about the Underground Railroad. At least by fourth grade, and then we think of even the Civil War and what all kicked that off. I mean, how many years did we have to learn about that? We think of all this stuff, and then you get into things like Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and Malcolm X and a lot of big names, Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. That's another person that we learn about. And we were in a majority of white schools. We were in small towns where it was majority white people that went into our schools, right?
Oh, for sure. I think I knew three people of color in my entire school, and two of them were brothers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the smaller schools that we went to, that was definitely the case. But we still learned about Black history. So where are they ignored in the history book? And then to get to the last one, stereotyped in Hollywood.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's when I have a problem.
where? Where are they if anything, they're praised in Hollywood. And they're pressing to get more, like, there's been so many scenarios where all right, and this isn't a criticism other than the fact that they're changing the storylines. But there's literally characters who were drawn to be white in maybe comics or old stories. They are literally just a white person, and that is just their description. It's not racist in any sort. That's just their description. That's who they are. And Hollywood deliberately changes them to be black. And I don't have any criticism towards that. I'm just saying that's what goes on in Hollywood. So how are you stereotyped in Hollywood?
My
You
only
know,
criticism to that is I think there's a lot of push to make it black, to make it a race thing, and I think that's my biggest issue with any of that is that, hey, you know, Superman was a white little boy that came down from outer space, and he was white. It's okay. Like, it doesn't. It has nothing to do with race. It's just that's how he was. So let's not change it. Just to make a, well, we have to be on level playing fields. It's not about him being white. It's about him being Superman. So
yeah,
let's leave it be.
yeah. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
That's
You know,
Hollywood forcing that into our minds again, that there's a race issue in America that's not actually there.
yeah. And one thing I would like to ask of the people who are sharing this post and just praising this post, how many of you actually have direct ancestry to the people who were slaves in America? Because a lot of them, a lot of America today is really recently recently immigrated to America. So how many of you really have a direct ancestry to the slavery that went on in America? And not only that, but when we look at it, racism isn't the only way that slavery happens, necessarily. I guess it would still be racism, but it's not white to black racism is what I mean. But instead, what it can also be is we can look at several. The Irish have been persecuted multiple times. They were white, and they were put into slavery and really gruesome slavery, and they were white. We can look.
The
We can look.
Holocaust was white people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can look at the Jews and see that they were white people, and they were put under the same, similar oppression. So, it's just to take all of this. I don't think any of this deserves a whole month worth of remembering what happened, but rather, how about we just teach history the way that we've taught history? Like I said, I learned a lot about Black history in more than just February when I was growing up, and that is ignored. So it just seems completely crazy. And on top of that, backing up to what we were discussing before, where Britain, maybe you can help me. Where is there systemic racism in America?
I tell you where there is. I think it's against white people. Um, Honestly, I think genuinely, and I'm not going to sit here and have a pity party and say, oh, I feel so bad because I'm white, whatever, nothing like that. But I mean, I genuinely do feel like, if you're white and if you're a male and if you like to hunt or fish or do anything that most men like to do, you're categorized as a racist. You're looked at differently. You are treated differently in the media. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff going on. So, if anywhere, I feel like it's especially really difficult in America to be a white male.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it really is white male that has the most criticism upon them, because if you're white, you are racist, and if you are male, you are sexist. That's just how it is. And that is like the worst category to be in: white male, patriot, conservative. And if you want to add Christian in that, we actually have a shirt too. I can pull that back up for you. I think that's in our overlay there on the one on the left. White male, Christian, conservative. When you put yourself in that category, you are going to be the most oppressed today. But really, when we think of systemic racism, how about we look at things like affirmative action, and how Black Americans are really kind of nudged into colleges over white Americans. And really, if we want to look at the most oppressed, we can look at Asians, because in a lot of Ivy Leagues, Asians are required to test out higher to get into colleges, higher than any other race, any other ethnicity. How is that any fair? How is that not talked about as being systemically racist? That just doesn't make any sense to me. I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and racism in general needs to be discussed because again, I'm going to talk more about this in our upcoming episode. So make sure to tune into that on Tuesday. We're moving it to Tuesdays for all of our podcasts. So I encourage you to go check that out. But we need to talk about what racism is because racism, when we start to use that term so much, we completely nullify the true meaning behind it. And it's something that needs to be stopped. We need to talk about racism and what it really is and try to stop real racism in America, not just what we want to keep on calling racist, and that's things that aren't. So we need to focus on what that term really is. But let's go ahead and move on. Republicans are attacking our democracy, as everyone knows, because AOC said so. And again, I think we can always trust anything AOC is going to tell us. But AOC, she came out. For those who don't know, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. She hinted that she thinks that the U.S. might not even have a democracy within 10 years. In a decade, she thinks that the Republicans and white nationalists are going to be blamed for this surge in crime and these child tax credits expiring. The Republicans and white nationalists, because it's always easier to blame white people.
Sounds like
that's
racism.
what's that?
Sounds like racism.
Yeah, it is. Well, and let's turn that around. Let's say that we were to come out and we were to say, let's flip both of those around. In a decade, thanks to the Democrats and the black nationalists, and blame the surge in crime and child tax credits and expiring on black nationalists. You know, wouldn't we be criticized for that? Wouldn't mainstream media be all over that? That's when you sit there and you take some of these things that people say and you just flip it around and use anything else. If you use, instead of man, use woman, it's sexist. If you use black instead of white, it's racist. But when you talk down to a white black man, or sorry, a white black man, how does that work? But
Yeah,
when you talk down about a white man, it's okay. It's sickening. But of course, AOC is going to try to blame white nationalists, and it's white supremacy, and it's all these white people that are just ruining America. And that's that's literally the Democrats' go-to. That's mainstream media's go-to. But she thinks that within a decade, we're just not going to have a democracy anymore, which that's not really what America is, but whatever. We'll kind of go with it. And what she is talking about being the end of democracy is just not so. But whenever she was asked about her thinking that there wouldn't be a democracy within 10 years, she says, I think that there's a very, very real risk that we will not. What we risk is having a government that perhaps postures as a democracy and may try to pretend that it is, but it isn't. So she thinks that within 10 years, it won't be the democracy that we have here in America. And she goes on to even say that you have a very targeted, specific attack on the right to vote across the United States, particularly in areas where Republican power is threatened by changing electorates and demographics. You have white nationalists, uh, reactionary politics starting to grow into a critical mass. What we have is the continued sophisticated takeover of our democratic systems in order to turn them into undemocratic systems, in all in order to overturn the results that a party in power may not like. So in other words, it's white supremacists and Republicans who are trying to overturn everything, and they're going to make it to where your vote doesn't matter, because what she's hinting to is things like requiring a photo ID to vote, because that's racist. You know, Britain, I'm sure it was really hard for you to get a photo ID, and you had to have a lot of money to go in and do it, right?
oh, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
It was like 1999 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and some
the line
places
was very hard
yeah,
because the
yeah,
DMVs suck.
you
Hey,
have to
America, you want to fix something? Fix the DMVs.
yeah, you have to sit there and wait forever, like the little cartoon movie Zootopia where it's got the little sloth and he's
Yeah.
sitting up there sitting
So
there and he's
I had to show you my ID sometime. I'm sitting there and I'm like I just came in really quick, like after work. I worked a long, hard day and I was tired and like got in like last second, stood through this long line and I like have, they make me take my hat off, like all this stuff. And I was like just straight face, just like Superman. She's like, you can smile. I'm like, I'm in a DMV, I'm not smiling. I'm like, take the picture. I'm like, I'm so mad. So I'm like, as soon as I move out here in a couple weeks, we're moving out of state. I'm gonna try and smile in my next picture. Every time I hand my ID, I'm like, man, that's why I hate DMVs.
you can't smile and show teeth though, because I tell you can't show teeth, so then you're like, try
Yeah, well,
I have
I
to
want to be extra white and wear like a mega hat and be like, you can't make me take this off.
yeah.
Or if I wear a Black Lives Matter hat, I suppose I could. I'm probably allowed to wear it.
Yeah, you're not allowed to wear a MAGA hat, but
Yeah,
I'm
Black
sure
Lives
you
Matter can be on your ID. It's official of 2022.
yeah. But, it's silly because, the Democrats act like requiring a photo ID is something and Biden himself even said that it's very hard for, poor people, referring to
Yeah,
Black Americans, to be able to get these photo IDs and, they have to be able to get there because there's not a DMV, like, on every side of town wherever you're at. Here I guess down in Columbus, I think there's like 4 or 5 DMVs, like, all over. And then when if you go to other towns, there's 1 per town. Like, where is it so difficult or, like, how is it so difficult to get down to the BMV? Or, that it just doesn't make any sense. But it's so difficult for them to get there, and they can't afford, what, $20 tops? Maybe not even that much in some states. You know, it's silly to act like that's just taking over our democracy and not allowing people to vote. And maybe what she's actually referring to is that she's worried that there would be people so corrupt to allow illegal voting, or maybe that they would allow there to be votes counted that shouldn't have been counted. Maybe that's what she's referring to. If so, shouldn't she be censored? I don't know. I find this a little odd that someone would be worried so much about, a democratic voting system when I think that's something that conservatives were a little concerned about not too long ago, and we were silenced for it. So AOC better be careful about what she's saying because she could be leading herself down the wrong road. But ultimately, it's just white supremacists that are causing all of these things. So just w- when you think of white supremacists, let's and she even brings up and some of the things she says, she even brings up Jim Crow, and she thinks that we're heading back to the Jim Crow days where we're going to start practicing Jim Crow law. When Democrats try using Jim Crow or the KKK, do they not realize where that actually stems from? Because the Jim Crow laws are actually laws that were put in place by the Democratic Party. And the KKK was founded by white Democrats. When are they going to stop using these things because they look into and realize where this history comes from? It's ridiculous. But they want to keep on bringing up Jim Crow and the KKK when in reality they are the ones that have to fight against that really we're the ones that are fighting against them. They're the ones that started the KKK and they're the ones that started these Jim Crow laws. But and I tried looking into it a while back too. I don't know where the term Jim Crow ever came from, but it's kind of an odd terminology. But these Jim Crow laws, they were founded by the Democrats. So when she's talking about us going back to the Jim Crow days, again, kind of like what we were talking about with voting integrity, is she maybe going against her fellow Democrats? If so, shouldn't she be careful? She better be very careful, or she's going to get silenced real fast. She's going to have a lot of censorship issues. But this idea that our voting systems are going down because we want to require a photo ID is just simply insane. It's just it's dumb. There's no reason for us to be talking about this like it's actually something to be worried about. But again, this is stuff that you're allowed to speak against white supremacists, and you're allowed to call out racism because that's the really the Democrats' game is to talk about racists and how everyone on the right, if you were a Trump supporter, you were a white racist. That's just the way it goes. And you even kind of mentioned just a moment ago, Brent, how if you're into fishing or hunting and drive a truck that gets a little muddy, oh, you must be a racist because you're kind of fitting that stereotype. So isn't that the kicker? They're so worried about stereotypes, but here they are kind of stereotyping all of us as white
Right.
supremacists. It's crazy. And when you think about it too, it's silly because I know so many people who just don't know much about politics and they just assume that Trump supporters in general are racist, that they're all these white people. That there's like floods of white people that are Trump supporters or even just Republican in general. And it's funny because when you look at that and realize like where all of that actually comes from and they really just over exaggerate and they don't really realize that we aren't all white and we aren't all white supremacists. We're not racist. Really, very few of us are racist. But so like the over exaggeration of people on the right, they act like we're horrible people. And then when we talk about people on the left, we don't even have to over exaggerate them to show how stupid they are and how just over the top they are.
I'll tell you what, I'm not racist. I own a color TV.
I guess that might take you out of the category. I don't know. Well, apparently having a black friend doesn't count. So, you
Yeah.
know, we have to find some other way to get us out of that situation, right? But
It's kind of mind-boggling to me that over the years, probably I don't know, the last probably 5 to 10 years, I'd say, especially, we've seen a lot more of this propaganda from the media that hey, America's racist and we need to. This is a big problem that we have. We need to fix it. Um, but it seems to me like all the times that something happens or something is done that creates some kind of chaos, whether it was the George Floyd or whatever. It's always in weird timing to me. So obviously there's the conspiracy theories on everything, but there's obviously a lot of conspiracy theories about the fact that these things are done intentionally to stir up America, to create diversion and get us thinking in other directions, and then they're in the background doing something, you know, and once again screwing the American over without us knowing about it. And I almost think there's some truth to that, but if you really just look at it, it's like the racism in America does not exist today. If anything, I see more white people today than I ever have before coming out against racism and standing up for the black man, so to speak, you know, and trying to take the side. I have people on Facebook that are constantly posting, which I think is whatever. I mean, it's freedom of speech, so post away. But oh, racism is terrible. Racism is so bad. And it's like, no, I 100% agree, but let's quit talking about it because it's not a thing anymore. Let's quit talking about it and let's get past it together. We can't get past it if we're going to continue to bring it up and continue to talk about it each and every day. And like I said, I feel like today I see more white people coming out than ever before against racism and talking about it and bringing it up. I mean, there's tons of bad things. Let's keep talking about 9/11 and how terrible it was. Let's post about it every single day because that's going to change things. It's not going to change things. You know how we get past things is we come together, we realize, and we get together and say, "Hey, this was a terrible thing. Let's promise to never let this happen again," and we move on. We move on, and that's the biggest thing. Dad used to say something to me. a lot, and he always used to tell me, he said, anytime I get in trouble or do anything bad, he'd say, "Time heals all wounds." And what that means is that, hey, this, whatever you're going through right now, or whatever you're going through, it's terrible right now. But as time goes on, you learn, and you change, and you forget about it, and you move on, and then you're healed. Well, we can never heal as America if we don't let time heal. Yeah, if we're going to continue to bring it up each and every day, we will never get past racism.
Yeah, and there's I don't remember how long ago it was, but there was an interview with Morgan Freeman, and he
Mhm.
basically said this a very similar thing, or they were asking him about Black History Month, and he said, "Well, would you want White History Month?" And the guy was like, "No, well, why would I?" He said, "Exactly. So why would I want Black History Month?" And ultimately, what he's saying is like Black history is American history, and that's kind of what I was mentioning just a moment ago. Is that Black history is American history. If we learn American history, we learn Black history, especially in America, and the way that Black history runs, it has ran in America. And it really is a cool story to look through and to see how as America we fought through this together. And like you said, I don't know of anyone really personally, I don't know of anyone that has looked at, any kind of post and seen, "Oh, racism is bad." And they were like, "No, no, it's good."
Yeah,
I've never seen anybody really fight back with that argument. There's I'll say 99% because I'm sure there is a 1%, somewhere out there. And in even the 1%, maybe not even fully, full racist or whatever, but really only like 99% of white Americans are totally on board with, hey, don't be racist. And 99% of the situations, if someone were to see a black man being treated poorly, a white man would step up and step up for that black man. So it's silly to sit here and act like there's so many racists, or that our system is so racist, or that black Americans are being hunted down by the cops. All this ridiculous narrative just needs to stop. And
just
kind
for
of
the
like you.
record, I would be okay with the Morgan Freeman Day. I would sign that paper.
I mean, you can't be against God, right?
Yeah, he is God himself. I mean,
He is he is God
I
in the
didn't know
flesh.
God was black, but apparently he is, and I'm okay with it because it's Morgan Freeman. It
I
makes
don't
sense now.
I don't think God's white either, but I don't know. I'm not
You know,
really
when I
sure.
saw when I saw that movie, it all just made sense to me that, like, of course, this whole time Morgan Freeman is God. How did we not know this?
I mean, yeah, when you look at Bruce Almighty and Evan Almighty, of course, like that's why his voice is on all of the documentaries. It
Yeah,
makes sense now.
he's been
It's like
around forever.
it's like a voice coming from heaven. That makes sense. It was Morgan Freeman the whole time.
And the fact that he came down on Earth as a black man, maybe that's why we have Black History Month.
That makes sense. Morgan Freeman started Black History Month, not LeBron
Yes.
James.
It,
I think
yeah,
LeBron James was one of the co-founders,
yeah,
but
screw LeBron James. It was actually Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman was the founder and co-founders
Yes.
because he is three. There
Yeah.
are three Morgan Freemans in one.
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, there you go. The Morgan, the Freeman, and the Morgan Freeman.
Yep.
But yeah, it really needs to. We need to realize. So again, looking at things like this, where we want to act like trying to get people to legally vote, when we want to pretend like that is racist, it needs to stop and it needs to be talked out against, because that's not what racism is. Racism is a real thing, and racism should be something that is called out when it's done. And I think that's what you and I were kind of alluding to, where if there is racism going on, it needs to be stopped. It needs to be put to an end. But when we start to call everything racist, when we call someone racist, we'll bring up Joe Rogan. That's been a huge thing recently. When we want to try to call, and it's, let's get this straight. They're not attacking Joe Rogan because he's racist. They're not attacking Joe Rogan because he's spreading misinformation. They just want to silence him. That's the end of the discussion there. But when we start to call people racist just because they say a racial slur, that's not what racism is. And not only that, but especially when you have to dig so deep to take that racial slur that was said and take it out of context, where it's clearly not being racist whatsoever in the context. That's what we need to stop, because racism is a real thing and it can be very damning. But we need to stop calling everything racist like that, like the Joe Rogan scenario, because when real racism it comes up, it means nothing when you call that person a racist anymore. It means nothing.
I think
And
you bring up a good point there. I mean, obviously we're speaking out against certain things, but I mean, just to be clear, neither one of us agree with racism. I think racism is terrible, no matter what race you are being racist against. I think it's a terrible thing. I think that there were a lot of terrible things that happened within the Black community back in history. Um, I don't condone any of those actions. I don't, I think that racism is terrible. Just end of story. If you're a racist, then you're a piece of garbage. I mean, that's just to put it out there.
I'm glad you caught
Um,
yourself because I don't have a bleep button.
you're just a piece of garbage. So it's like I don't, I don't just because I'm a white man and I did vote for Donald Trump. Just to put that out there. If you're a racist, you're a piece of garbage. That's where I'm coming with this.
Watch out, kids. Guard your ears. We're getting dirty
Yeah,
around here.
yeah,
I mean, kids shouldn't be watching this anyways. This is two white guys.
it's racist.
That's horrible. And I've got an American flag behind me. Racism. But yeah, I mean, it really is. And racism is something that 99% at least, it's probably more than that when we really boil it down. 99% of white Americans are going to be against racism. And we're going to stand against racism. Anywhere where you actually show real racism, we'll stand out against it for you. But when you start to call things racist that aren't racist, that's where you start to just completely destroy the terminology of racism. Things like voter ID is not racism. Let's actually attack real racism whenever it occurs. And that's really how we attack racism. There's actually a movie that comes up to my mind. It's one that I recently just watched. I heard a lot of really good reviews about it. It's called Harriet. It's about Harriet Tubman, and I really do recommend. I think it's a very good movie, and it really shows a lot of really cool stuff. That's the kind of stuff that does need to be shown. It does need to be taught, because there's even some things in that movie that it really points out a lot about the history behind the Underground Railroad that you don't necessarily learn in school. Just kind of going deeper into detail with things that you don't really teach kids necessarily. But it's just you have to. I definitely recommend that movie though. I think it's a really good movie. It's called Harriet, but it
You know,
was
we actually had a house there in Paoli, Indiana, in the town that was it's an old house. I used to go running a lot, and I used to pass this house, and I learned from one of the older guys at one point that there's actually a that used to be part of the Underground Railroad down below that,
yeah, and
which I thought was pretty cool.
that's the cool thing is like you can see like all over. I think they've even got a map that I saw somewhere, and there's actually a lot in Iowa too. That's where Britt and I were born, and so it's really cool to see how white Americans back in that day when racism was very strong, especially in the southern states, how there was a lot of white Americans who stood up and tried to help those black slaves who were trying to get away from slavery, and they were trying to make it to Pennsylvania to free themselves. It's a really cool story, and that is stuff that we should be teaching, but don't just try to emphasize it 1 month a year, and especially the shortest month of the year. Emphasize that all year round. I think that there's a lot of cool American history that revolves around talking out against racism and how racism once was a thing in America, but we were able to fight through it. That's the cool story about America, is that we came together and unified to fight against racism. It was white Americans and black Americans that fought against racism. That's an amazing thing. That's what should be taught. That's what should be praised. But
Serious question for you, and I don't really know the answer to this, but I think I have an idea, but I don't know. Um, do you think that black people nowadays, the majority of black people, do you think that they actually care about the black history?
No, I think they
The
the
majority. I'm not saying like the celebrities like LeBron James with a platform or Colin Kaepernick that was, you know, only raised by a rich white family, but whatever. Um, yeah, I'm talking about like the majority of the black community that you just see on a day to day basis. Do you think they actually genuinely care about Black History Month?
no, I really don't think so because I think now I don't know about majority. I'm just thinking the majority that is kind of shown to us. You know, the if it's if a silent majority is silent, I guess they would be the loud majority. But when you look at like mainstream media and you know, when you do look at you know Hollywood and a lot of celebrities and things like that, I think when you think of the majority in that sense, at least the majority that we can hear, I don't think they do because if they really knew what Black history was, then they would realize that Black history was helped by white Americans and how we are now unified because of that, and how that really is a unification between white and blacks, is that we fought through it together. That's the amazing thing about our country is that now we can all fight to be whatever we want now because we ended racism together. So really, I don't think they really care about Black history because Black history is American history, and they don't care about American history. They don't care about America. So no, I don't know. I mean, from the majority that I know of, I don't think they really do, and I think they'd be more knowledgeable about it if they did.
Well, I'm just trying to think about like all the, you know, the rougher parts of neighborhoods and stuff that we're the people that I physically see, you know, in these neighborhoods. I've never met LeBron James, and I never want to. I've never met, you know, some of these celebrities that we hear their voice. But as far as, you know, just the people that I can physically see on a day to day basis, I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't feel like they give two worries about, you know, anything to do with the history.
No.
You know, I just don't think they care. I think they I don't think that it affects them. I don't feel like a lot of them think that they're held down. I think that if they're told that they are, I think that there is an issue within that specific group that, you know, they want to feel held down. They want to feel like, you know, I'm only making this much money an hour because of this. It's not because, you know, I'm not putting the work in, or it's not because I'm not, you know, they don't take the credibility, you know, the accountability maybe in that aspect. But I feel like a lot of them, a lot of the racism that people feel like that they actually have against them is simply just because they're lazy individuals. And I'm not saying that all black people are, but I feel like the ones that really do feel like they're being held down, they're being held down because they're actually just lazy and they don't want to work and they don't want to actually put in the work and the effort to achieve what they want to.
Yeah, and I think I would just say that BLM and Antifa, you know, protesters and activists, I think they're the ones that we can call lazy
Yeah.
because
Yep.
they just they don't look into the facts and the real logic behind things. And that's why. It's not because they're lazy because of their race or because of anything other than the pure fact that they just choose to be lazy and not look into to the real facts and the real
Oh, there are
history.
white people. There are white people that are on that side of things that are just as lazy. I mean,
We have relatives that are absolutely lazy and just don't know truth from their own rear end. But yeah, it's just sad to see how segregated America is because we want to make racism something that it isn't. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And I think that's what people like AOC are trying to do is trying to separate us so far to where it's going to start a war if we don't boil it down and find what it really is. But kind of moving on, there. This is a story. I think this is a really cool story to look at. But I've also seen some criticism of it. I wanted to play the video. It won't allow me to download the video to be able to pull it up and to display it for you. So we won't bother with that. But I will explain it to you a little bit. There's a man and his family up in Ottawa. I guess they traveled over to Ottawa. They are Canadians, and they went really to see the protests and to kind of partake for a little while. I believe he brought two of his children, one of them being his daughter, and his daughter had a Canadian flag. She was flying it. She had a flag on a pole, and she was flying that. And proudly going to these protests. And when we look at the Canadian protests, they really are just that. There has been no violence. If there was, you know for a fact that mainstream media would have been all over it. They are trying to make violence out of nothing. The only real violence that has been there is the police attacking them under their orders. And that's the only thing that you see. You don't see people burning down buildings, you don't see them flipping over cars like we did in the summer of 2020 and really ever since George Floyd's death, where we see these BLM and Antifa riots. So they're not riots, they are simply protests. They've been parking their trucks all over and just simply stating that they do not want to bow down to these mandates, that they're forced to get vaccines. So it really has been a great thing. I 100% I support these truckers and all of those people who have been supporting them. But this man, he went there to see the protest with his family, and they when they were there, his daughter who was flying a flag, some man came and assaulted his little daughter and took the flag away from her. And so as he took it away, the man went back up to this thug and stole the flag back away from him. And I encourage you to go check out the video. I will have a link to it in the show notes when you go over to politicallyinsane.us and click on the sources. You can see all of the sources there. But he went up to this man and confronted him. And you can see in the video that he confronts him, rips the flag back away from him. Some part of the video I can't really make out what exactly happens because of the camera shaking around everywhere, but the man ends up falling on his own butt, and and then he's screaming in pain, and the man fights for his daughter, gets the flag back without being really violent. So again, another great thing to see that it's not turning violent in any sense. So very good. And, so he gets the flag back, and then one of the bystanders calls the cops, and this dirtbag gets arrested. And as he's being arrested, you can hear him screaming that he thinks he's has a broken ankle, which is good. He deserves it. But this is the kind of things that you're seeing is that people are so frustrated with these protesters not being violent that they're jumping in there to be violent and really proving the protest to be effective. So I mean, it's really been a great thing. This is one thing. Again, I wish I could pull the video up. We just have some issues trying to get that video, but I'll have the link in the show notes. So go check them out at politicallyinsane.us and click on sources, and you can find our sources there, and as well as this video. But it really is cool to see this where this dad. The criticism I saw was that he didn't stand up and really beat this guy and get violent. I understand that criticism, but at the same time, I don't think this is the time or place to do that because you don't want these protests to get out of hand and have any kind of mainstream media see any kind of violence coming from the protesters. But it was really cool to see justice served where the police came in and arrested the right guy. So it's a very cool story, very good. But something that I can definitely commend the father for standing up for his daughter, getting her flag back, and fly that flag proudly because I think you're starting to see the Canadians that us Americans could get along with through all these protests. But, other than a few hockey players, I think, there's very
Yeah.
few Canadians we could get along with.
Well, Sidney Crosby stole my heart, and then he ruined it the same year when he beat us in the USA. He
Yeah,
was playing when he played for Canada and beat USA.
he's a wuss, but
Sidney Crosby's the kid. He's the man.
nah, you're just I don't know. I don't know what it is about him because he's a great player. I don't know, there's just something about him I don't like him. I don't know what it is,
Why
but
he's a tough player. He fights through all kinds of stuff. He's a team player. He has more assists than anybody. He's only the second. I think he's now the second leading scorer in the Penguins' history, and he's still super young. What's not to like about the guy?
I don't know.
It's because
There's
he's so good that people hate him.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people hate him, but there's something about his face that just makes me wanna punch him. He just looks
Yeah,
like such a boy.
I wouldn't fight Sidney Crosby because he's got about 8 other guys that are way bigger
He's got
that'll come
Zdeno
stand up
Chara
to
on
him.
his side. I don't wanna mess Oh, no, Zdeno Chara's in Boston, my bad.
No,
I'm thinking black and yellow, so I was like, "Oh, it's Zdeno Chara," but he's in Boston. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's just got a punchable face. I think that's why I don't like him. But He just looks like somebody who would be very enjoyable to punch.
Well, I would like to have tea and crumpets with him someday, so
There's a lot of Canadians just in general, just I don't know, the way that they act, I don't know, they just I think they're very polite, but I don't think they're nice. Like, that's always, like, the stereotype of Canadians. Any Canadians that I've met too bad Tyler's not here so we can make fun of him for being Canadian.
yeah.
Yeah, like, I think his parents were Canadian or something like that, but, yeah, I don't know, there's just something about Canadians, but we're finally finding the Canadians that live in rural areas that are just patriotic for their country the same way that us in America, we're patriotic. And the thing with Canada is they have free speech laws that are being broken by their own government, and that's what's sickening. And it really is good to see another country such as Canada stand up for their own country, for their own countrymen, and especially for these truckers that are just trying to fight against these mandates. They don't want to be forced to get a vaccine if they don't want it, and that should be their right. Nobody should have to tell you you have to get a specific vaccine or that you have to get some sort of specific medication. If you were to come down with cancer, I would hope nobody would tell you that you have to go through a specific treatment and that you have the right to go through whatever treatment you want to go through. Whatever it might be, and that's comparing it to cancer. COVID isn't even a 100th of what cancer is. So we're overreacting, and I'm really tired of talking about COVID. I really am. I wish we could just see the facts and get past it. Can we have new issues? It's annoying.
Let's go back to racism. I'm tired
Yeah,
of dealing with COVID.
I know it really is. It's between racism or COVID. Take your pick. It's 2022. Which one? And now we're starting to get gender in there. So
Can
we
we
got
learn about
three.
like how COVID's actually racist because black people are more likely to die from COVID than white people. So actually, COVID's been the racist thing the whole time. So we all can get together and just bully COVID and gang up on COVID instead of each other.
Yeah.
I found the solution.
Statistically, that is true. Like, it seems like COVID was attacking black, yeah, it really
Mhm.
just the black race in general harder than it did, to whites, and I don't know what that was exactly. It might be maybe their population is older, I'm not sure. But it is weird how certain viruses and things like that will attack just races in general, different races, and that goes to all races. It is kinda weird how that works in genetics, but, but ultimately, it's just it really is cool to go through and to see all of these Canadians just all standing up for one another. It's cool to see a nation unite and peacefully do so because we don't see that in America very often. How often do you see these peaceful protests? Um, but there really is a lot. Real quick, just to kind of get to some of the chats, I want to bring up. We've got a few chats worth bringing up. The first one just by uh, Noke Vnock just says hi with a smiley face. Hello, it's good to see you. And then we've also got another comment here, and this one was definitely worth bringing up. The Bushcraft Wizard, really cool name too. I actually like that. Bushcraft is something else that Canadians are really big into, especially the rural Canadians. But he says, "How come World War III is about to kick off and people are still more concerned with the truckers who don't want to get the vaccine?" Well, for one, it's because these truckers deserve to let their voices be heard in the right platform, and not only that, but we still don't have a whole lot of information on Ukraine, and we've talked about that. But I don't know. It's kind of odd. Is there really supposed to be a war kicking off in Ukraine or not? If that's the war you're talking about, if you're talking about just overall everything happening in the world, especially when you think of China, yeah, okay, that's definitely something that needs to be talked about more. I will take that to note. But ultimately, when we talk about the truckers, it's because they deserve to be talked about in a bright note because they're doing a great thing. And then this one just says sources question mark by Everbean. Sources are all at politicallyinsane.us, and you can click on sources. They'll be uploaded after the show. I usually don't upload them until after the show, but I appreciate you checking in because we do have sources and we make sure to always have those sources That way you can see where we're getting in our information. And also do note that if you're actually watching this show seriously and you're actually paying attention, a lot of the things we say, like when we were talking about the origin of Black History Month or things like Morgan Freeman being God, recognize what sarcasm is. But so we're not going to have sources for whether Morgan Freeman really is God or not.
I'll put that one in there. I've got the source for
Okay,
that one.
is that Jude 3,
Yes,
Jude chapter 3?
verse 2 actually.
Jude chapter 3, verse 2, Morgan Freeman is God, something like that. We'll
Yeah.
make sure to add that in the sources as well. But
Yep.
yeah, always for anyone watching or listening, always go check it out. All of our sources are at politicallyinsane.us. And always make sure to tune in here. For those who have tuned in so far tonight, you know where we're at every Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. That may be changing a little bit just because I've had some people reach out to me about times and everything. But as of right now, we are every Saturday live at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, or Facebook. You can watch us on all of those. And then our podcast, we usually release it. We used to release it on Mondays. We're releasing it on Tuesdays now. Of course, this last week was an exception just because of scheduling issues. But always check us out. We also upload the audio to this. So if you ever miss a part of this and you don't feel like watching the video and you just want to listen to it on the car ride or something like that, you can always check us out. But let's go ahead and jump into this week in history. All right, this week in history is actually a pretty cool thing because February 18th, 1885, a very good book was published, one that has a lot of criticism, both for its ignorant and coarse narrative. But that book was published by Mark Twain, and that is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which has been attempted to be canceled several times throughout history since it was written. But this week in history in 1885, actually just yesterday in 1885, so that's pretty cool. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, a really good story too. Really, if you
Fantastic book.
and especially when you realize what time of history this was written in, you have to kind of equate that into things. It's a really good book. It's a really cool story. And Mark Twain, how can you criticize the guy? But it has been attacked left and right since it was released. Something that I know you and I have read in school, and something that if you're younger than let's see, I'm 24, so if you're like 20 or something like that or younger, and you're watching right now, and you haven't read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn or the sequel to it, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, I recommend them because I think those were a couple of the books that I really enjoyed. A few of the books that I really read through and actually enjoyed. I think the Scarlet Letter was the other one that I liked. But
I didn't like that one too much. I liked To Kill a Mockingbird was my favorite.
see, I only liked the Scarlet Letter after I watched the movie, and I was like, "Oh, this is what this book's about." So then the next year when we read it, I actually read the book. But so like after I saw the movie, I was like, "Oh, that's cool. That's actually a pretty cool story. I'm gonna have to read it next year." So like overall, though, I think the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is definitely a book that if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read it. I don't think it needs to be canceled whatsoever. But what'd you have for this week in history, Britt?
I picked 1965 Ranger 8 landed on the moon and took 7,000 pictures. Were sent back to the United States to actually get a look at the moon. The reason I picked this one is because of I think it's kind of comical because I personally don't believe that we ever landed on the moon. So this was actually in my humble opinion the first evidence of anything on the moon that we ever gathered.
All right, Alex Jones. But
So yeah, I have my conspiracies on that. So I had to pick that one because I thought that was funny.
I mean, Alex Jones isn't always wrong. They really were turning the frogs gay. I don't know. There's quite a few things you can look at. Alex Jones might be crazy, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to fight against a man when sometimes he's right. And I don't know. Same thing with the moon conspiracies. I think there's a lot to look into that, and it's like I don't know. It's just one of those things that it's really hard to completely trust it.
Oh,
Like
it's easy. We never landed on the moon.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to look at it, and especially when you look into the time frame when we said that we landed on the moon, and it was just this huge, like, really this huge competition. I was gonna say some things that weren't PG, but, like, it's this competition with Russia and us trying to get to the moon first, and it was like, "Oh, well, see, we landed on the moon first." Maybe, and then you can look at all kinds of things like, why was the flag waving the way that it was if there's no gravity and it's just like waving like there's a fan on it or something, like there's
Or are
wind.
there air bubbles?
Yeah, and why are there shadows in all kinds of different directions? Like it's kind of obvious, and then also the moon is extremely hard. Like it's a huge rock, but somehow we left footprints and we were able to stab a flag straight down into it like it was nothing. I don't know.
Not to mention that the accounts of the people that have supposedly actually been there, one individual's asked, "What is it like looking out? Looking out of the space shuttle?" And he's like, "Oh man, it's beautiful. You see the stars brighter than ever, just everywhere around you." And then somebody else says, "Oh yeah, actually, when you're up there, when you look out your window, you can't see anything.
Yeah,
It's like because you're up there, so you don't see anything. It's like just complete pitch black." Like, okay, well, you guys were supposedly in the same place
yeah.
in the atmosphere, and you can't even agree on that. So
Well, and what we don't want to admit is that the Earth is actually flat, but we've never actually been to outer space, so we really
flat
can't tell.
earther, I like it.
No, I've actually met so many people recently, and like it was after, so I didn't even know that that was actually still a thing.
Oh,
Like that
it's a
people
big
were
thing now.
really
Yeah.
hardcore flat earthers, and I didn't even realize that that was really truly a thing. I just thought it was people being silly or something. But ever since learning about like I've met one person, I was like, really? And then it seems like within the last 2 years, I know so many people who are flat earthers now, like legitimately flat earthers. I was like, wow, okay, yeah. So
I want to do some studying on that.
it's really like the only reason why they're flat earthers is just because they don't want to trust anything anyone tells them, which I can hop on board that train to an extent, but not to just completely deny any kind of science. I don't know. I trust Elon enough to where I think we have a round Earth, but I don't know. There's too many pictures and satellites and stuff like that that I don't know, and just the overall physics of it. And then I also saw this video where this guy like tried proving the flat Earth to be true using like a hole and then a guy held a light above his head so far, so
Yeah.
if he travels a certain distance, he's like, see, I'm gonna still be able to see this. And so he was like shining putting the camera through the hole at this exact angle, and he can't see. He's like, no, hold it up at 8 feet. You're supposed to hold it at 8 feet. Are you holding it at 8 feet? He's like, yeah. Oh, wow. And he like totally proved himself wrong. But I don't know, there's too much science to say that it's not. But a lot of cool stuff that happens, and it's really cool to look back in history and see the things that happened. And maybe from now on, our this week in history needs to be a little more along the lines of Black History Month. I didn't even think of that, honestly, but
It's awful racist of you.
that is racist of me. And I even brought up a racist book for Black History Month. But anyways, that's really all we have for today. I want to thank everybody for watching. Make sure to tune in again. Just want to let everyone know that as of right now, until we tell you otherwise, we are here live every Saturday. So tune in next Saturday. Share it with your friends, your family as well, that we are live every Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. And then, of course, also you can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we are going to have podcasts there. Check us out at politicallyinsane.us and on social media. Thank you, everybody, and God bless. Oh, hey there. You're still here. Okay, well, if you made it this far, you might as well just go ahead and hit that share button. Go ahead and share this episode on social media with your friends, your family, whomever you think wants to hear this episode. Just go ahead and share it. It's a great way to help us. You can also help support Politically Insane by going over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and giving us a 5-star rating. It's a great way to get us up towards the top of the charts. And you can go over to politicallyinsane.us/shop and you can find all of our merchandise in the store there. Go check it out. We've got a lot of cool things, lots of tumblers and mugs and t-shirts, and it will be constantly growing. So you can support us there and also rep Politically Insane. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for all of our updates. And go ahead and subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rumble channel, wherever it is that you are watching right now. Or if you're just listening, do whatever it is that you're supposed to do on the podcast platforms. Anyways, we thank you so much for watching, for listening, for supporting Politically Insane. God bless.